Howard Moses, born June 14th, 1944, and I just celebrated my 76th birthday. And I'm currently sitting in the backyard of the house I've lived in now since 1979.
Wow.
I'm Miriam Moses, better known as Bubby. I was born August 20th, 1945, and I'm delighted to spend time with my grandchildren.
And you have a big anniversary coming up, right?
This July 19th, we'll be married 50 years. We actually have two anniversaries because we got married in Israel, so in order to include my mother who was living there and couldn't come to the States at that time. And then we had September 7th, a reception for all those who couldn't make it to the wedding, and that was...
Which basically was a marriage without the chuppah.
We showed a video of our chuppah.
Smorgasbord, video of the chuppah, dinner, dancing.
At the East table.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Oh, I grew up at a house on Grant Avenue. Forgot the address.
Do you remember anything specific about the street, like what it looked like? Were there other Jewish families in your building?
In those days, the Bronx was made of primarily Jews, Italians, Irish, and you had apartment buildings. And each apartment building probably consisted of 100 units or something like that. And on my block, I must have had about 10 apartment buildings on both sides. And we lived in an apartment on Grant Avenue.
Did you like the apartment that you lived in?
That was all you had.
Right.
And then we moved from upstairs, on the third floor, we moved down to the lower floor, the ground floor, and I could see all the action in front of the house, which was more exciting.
What was the action you saw in front of your house?
Old ladies sitting in front with their chairs. They used to take out these kind of chairs, and they sat in front of the building when the weather got warm.
That's funny.
And it was, as I said, primarily Jewish.
Right.
I grew up at 5218 12th Avenue in Borough Park. I was born on the wrong side of the track. At that time, under the L, New Utrecht Avenue was the divider between the really primarily Jewish area and the mixed area. I lived on 12th Avenue, which was kind of michutz lamachane at that time. It was kind of mixed, Jewish, Italian, and it was a wonderful neighborhood to grow up in at the time. It's not anything like it is now. It was a very mixed Jewish neighborhood, primarily very educated Jews, immigrants. We had a flood of Holocaust survivors. I grew up with a lot of my friends' parents were Holocaust survivors. My class in Shalamith Elementary School, we were all first-generation American. There was one kid in my class, both parents were born in America, and I was sure that she was a convert because everybody's parents were European.
By the way, we went back to my old neighborhood on Grant Avenue, and underwent many changes. And those 10 apartment buildings I told you about, when we came to the block, it was fields.
Oh, wow.
Everyone was razed to the ground.
It was like after World War II.
During the
like,
1970s, the changes, etc. And then we came back a few years later, and they had 2 parks in the middle of the street. But those giant buildings were all gone forever. Now they have smaller units.
Zaidy used to like to come back to where he grew up, and for many years he saw his drapes on the window.
That's
For many years they kept his drapes.
They're such good drapes.
Goodness.
You want to speak first, Marin?
Okay. My mother was born in Szyszlowitz or Swisłocz, Poland. And that was a real small shtetl in Poland. She was a Litva. Everybody always complimented her Yiddish because it was a very high lit Yiddish. It was considered very educated Yiddish. It was a small shtetl, but some wonderful people came from that small shtetl besides my family. Rav Aaron Cutler, the founder of the Lakewood Yeshiva, came from Swisłocz, and he was actually a student of my great-grandfather. Samuel Belkin, one of the first chancellors of Yeshiva University, also grew up in Svislach or Shishlovitz. And my father, alav hashalom, he was born in Austria, Russia. He was a Galiciana. He spoke Yiddish a different way than my mother. And that was on the border between Austria and Russia, and it was a city. They even had a train stop there. So it was different. Both my parents immigrated to the United States in their 20s. And I never really learned how to speak Yiddish, but I learned how to understand it because it was the language of secrets. When my parents didn't want the kids to know what was going on, they'd speak to each other in Yiddish. And I'm very sorry I never learned Yiddish. When we were growing up, we felt it was like too similar to German, and there was such hatred towards Germany to what they did to the Holocaust that we didn't want to perpetuate their language. But over the years, when you travel, I always was jealous of those people who spoke a fluent Yiddish because you could communicate much more with Jews throughout the world.
I'll give you more facts and stories. My father came from Hungary. Actually, it was Romania and Hungary. It's called a place called Transylvania, and the town he came from was Silace, which is not far from a place called Santa Maria, which was Satma in Hungary. That's what they called it then. And my mother was a first-generation American because her mother, who came from Austria, a place called Turka, she moved to America in late 1890s, 1898. And then my mother was born here. They lived down 14th Street in Manhattan, where you would go to school, Shoshi.
That's fine.
And then they moved to the Bronx. My grandparents lived in the Bronx, my father's parents. I never knew my grandfather on my mother's side because I'm named after him. His name was Chaim Zev, that's my name, and he died of a heart attack in his young 50s, a few heart attacks. And basically, the Bronx was great at the time. Tons and tons of people there. You know, I went to Manhattan Day School. First, I started off in a school called Zichra Moshe. My mother was quite progressive. She was a teacher, a very bright woman, and she decided this school was not for me, so she transferred me to Manhattan Day School, where I got a great education. And then I went to MTA, where I got a great Hebrew Jewish education, because it was Ivrit, etc. And I got a very strong background for learning, which I've kept to this day in my life.
All right, my family belonged to the Young Israel of Borough Park, which my father was a very big supporter. He was one of the founders of the Shalamit School for Girls, which also shared that building. And he also supported Anshe Sfard. And my Zaidy, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Agushevitz, who was a very well-known scholar in Borough Park, he used to give a Gemara shir in Shomrei Muna to rabbis, really people who were very knowledgeable. And I didn't go to his levaya, but because I was like 9 or 10 when he died. But I still remember his levaya because I was allowed to go to the beginning. The Shomrei Muna had a huge staircase going up to this building, to the shul, and it was filled with people, and the coffin passed, and everybody stood and came for the levaya. He was like so honored by the neighborhood, and so I remember that. I remember his coffin passing and hordes of people on the steps standing when the coffin passed. So those were the three. My father used to love Chazanish music, so Rosh Chodesh benching, he would go to Temple Bethel in Borough Park, which was one of the most magnificent shuls you'd ever see, and he used to love to hear the Chazan daven.
Before I answer that question, let me just jump back to a previous question about parents. I didn't throw them. My mother was, as I mentioned, was a very bright woman, and she graduated Hunter College, as hopefully my granddaughter Shashi will pretty soon.
Yeah.
And she also then went to Columbia for a master's, so she was quite a woman. What's interesting is her perspective was very, very different than most people at the time. You didn't have any very rarely do you see a religious Jewish woman who graduated with a master's degree in those days from a university. But she was a teacher, and that's right. I guess my love for teaching stemmed from my mother, and she was a very, very good teacher. The kids loved her, and she always used to brag. She was an elementary school teacher in PS 70, and she used to brag how in her little class, I think it must have been like 25, 30 children, about 15 of them ended up with PhDs.
Yeah,
so that tells you the
cool.
level of education. And she also used to tell me stories about her school overlooked the Bronx, and there was a highway, which everybody knows now is a Cross Bronx Expressway. And she would tell me two stories about expressways. One, how when they cut the expressway, it was right near her school, that was the borderline, and they would have these bulldozers went right through the Bronx with that, and how the giant rats would come out because that was their hiding place. And when she was a younger woman, she lived on 14th Street when they built the subway. And when they built the subway across 14th Street, the grandfathers of those rats came out also.
For sure.
So she was there for quite a bit of construction in the city. So now the question, the second one was
about the shul.
Shul, yes.
Yeah.
I belonged to, my parents, I should say, belonged to Young Israel Claremont Parkway. It was a two-family house which was renovated into a shul. It was really, as they say, a Hamish shul. Everybody knew each other, loved each other. They killed each other. Some great fights in shul. I mean major fights, cursing, you name it.
Sfard level or?
No, not that. They were classier people. But everybody knew each other. There was a lot of love in the shul, and I had a great childhood because I loved the shul. I loved my neighborhood, and I have very good memories. And as I said, I got a great education from the shul and from my parents and the community. Okay.
My father wanted to move to Long Island at one point when I was in high school, and I wouldn't hear about it because Borough Park was the place to be. On Simchas Torah, Jews from all the tri-state area would come to Borough Park, and we would go shul hopping from one shul to another. And on Shabbos, there would be hordes of people going down 14th Avenue. It was a real social thing. It was just a great neighborhood to grow up in.
So did they have youth events also in your
Oh,
shul?
we had youth. The Bethel had a great youth davening minyan, and we had a lot of B'nai Akiva and Jewish organizations galore.
You know, I still remember Simchas Torah in my old shul. And everybody, I guess, always remembers Simchas Torah when you're a kid. It seems like the greatest thing ever. But we had two things about this shul. One was the minyas on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur was in the basement. To this day, I still start sweating when I think that during Yom Kippur, when it was about 98 degrees outside, and about 90% humidity, we davened in this basement.
Oof.
And it was so hot, I still feel the heat to this day. But getting back to Simchas Torah, I remember Simchas Torah, we started in the basement. There was a big table, and everybody was partying on this table. And the younger guys, who were probably guys in their 30s and 40s, who had children, started drinking, and it continued. And then it continues right up to the beginning of Simchas Torah, and it went through the whole night. And I have such fantastic memories of that. Not of the heavy drinking, but of the parties.
So,
All right, it was Sukkot time. Young Israel of the West Side had a weekend in Grossinger's Hotel, and the final part of the weekend was like a farewell party in the lower level of the Grossingers, and Zaidy was leaving, I was coming, and we literally collided into one another.
By the way, for the generational see this, if they do, Grossinger's was a very famous hotel in the Catskill Mountains. Okay.
And we collide into one another, and I always say that Zaidy says that ever since then, what a klutz I am. And we started to talk, and then I remembered...
Love at first sight.
I remembered that I saw him at a volleyball game, and he had a pocket in his shirt, and I wanted to play volleyball. And so I asked him if he could hold my keys, because, you know, girls' dresses didn't have pockets. And when we collided, I said, oh, you're the guy who held my keys, you know, whatever. And we started this conversation, and that's how we met.
Yep. And not only that, it was a long-distance relationship because I lived in the Bronx, and Miriam lived in Brooklyn. And that was in Brooklyn. That was considered geographically unacceptable.
Undesirable.
undesirable and unacceptable. So, but I had a car already. You know, I was an only child, so spoiled. Parents got me a car, right? I was a good boy. And I used to drive to Brooklyn. And
So after that, you started to take Bubby out on dates. You would pick her up from Brooklyn.
first
date, he got a ticket on his car.
Oh.
And he still went out with me afterwards.
That's right.
Besides the ticket, what did you guys do on your first date? Do you remember?
Went to a Shirley MacLaine movie.
It was a movie.
Oh.
There were a lot of movie theaters.
Comedy. Our marriage was
The actual marriage.
The actual wedding was really very hard to plan, not for the usual reasons. I was not one of these Godzilla brides that needed a lot of things, but my mother wasn't capable of coming to the States, and he was an only child. And of course, the simcha of having a wedding was very important to his family. And here we had to go to Israel, where his aunts and uncles never were.
But we should also mention people did not travel those days. You're talking about 1969, 70. People travel, but very, very, very rarely, and very few people travel. Right.
My mother had to make the arrangements herself for the wedding. We took a student flight, and because my mother was living in Israel, she asked me to take her mink stole. This was July, so I carried my white wedding gown and her mink stole on the student flight to Israel.
That's hysterical.
And my mother had heard of several bands that she checked out. She signed a contract with one, and this other band who she didn't sign a contract, for some reason they thought they were hired, even though she claimed that.
She apparently went to see them, and she said, "Oh, you'll play at my daughter's wedding," and that, for them that was good enough.
And they both showed up, and the one that didn't have a contract threatened to ruin the wedding.
Yeah.
So part of the wedding, my cousin Abraham was negotiating with this
Basically
other
paid them
band.
off.
Basically paid them off. And
by the way, just a few things about the wedding. It was in a hotel. At the time, it was called the Merkaz Central Hotel, which now is a Haredi hotel. At the time, it was still religious. You know,
it was
very
brand new at the
brand
time.
new. And my mother had this yellow dress,
Sequined
yellow dress, very fine dress. This is my only son getting married, and 2 nights before the wedding, the night before the wedding, I realized the wedding was going to be in this outdoor courtyard right near Mayor Sharon, and I figured I'd have 1 million guys coming around collecting.
because we saw a wedding and all the schnorrers came.
I mean, my poor mother in the yellow dress. So I had a nightmare the night before the wedding with my mother being attacked by these guys. And it worked out. It was okay because
we paid off.
We found out that the guy who ran the wedding hall, he gave an X number of dollars, and he basically paid people, so a lot of the poor people, you know, to be all over the wedding. This was, you know, American wedding. So it's a cute story about the wedding.
We lived in Borough Park in my mother's house in Borough Park because she wasn't living there.
5218 12th Avenue.
And Zaidy commuted to the Bronx, which was a long commute.
Carpool.
And then he switched to Park Slope. I worked until I was pregnant with Tova, and there were a lot of teachers being laid off at that time. So I actually went on maternity leave to save somebody's job. And Borough Park was becoming Hasidic at that time already. And for a while, the local storekeeper, grocery store, wouldn't let Howard in. He thought he was dangerous.
Yeah, originally I wasn't going to be a teacher. I thought I'd be a dentist, and I decided afterwards I couldn't, you know, I was accepted basically to certain schools, but I decided that it wasn't for me because they had short carvings and I really killed it. I figured I would have killed people in their mouths.
His carving turned into dust.
Yeah, and then I found there was a program over the summer where I was able to go into teaching, because at the time, this was the time of the Vietnam War, and to be perfectly honest, not too many people were, you know, running to join the military at the time, and I was one of them. But I was 1A the whole time anyway, so it didn't make much of a difference.
There are a lot of really good characteristics that he has, truly. One thing that I really respect enormously, because I'm so devoid of this characteristic, when he's challenged, he is so persistent in accomplishing and succeeding in something that he will really follow through and, you know, and not give up. And I respect that enormously. I also appreciate that he's very responsible. If he says something, it's going to happen. He's a man of his word, and he also has very good values. He always prioritizes the family and the family's needs.
And he took care of his fried man for 20 some odd years.
That's true, and that was no mean feat. But he's really a very dedicated husband and a really good father, in my opinion, and grandfather.
Go ahead.
It's an easy question to answer. Bubby is one of the most altruistic people I've ever met in my life. Super loving, warm-hearted. I can't just say enough, but it's something I'm not. Not that I'm not warm or loving, but I just, you know, we're programmed differently. And she's willing to do anything for anybody, even if it's not the right thing, but she'll do it either way. And this is what attracted me to her. You know, I came from a family with a very strong woman in the house. My father was a nice man, but my mother really ran the show. And you know,
But I don't run the show.
No, so I was attracted probably to something different in a way. But my mother also was a very warm person.
Yes,
Very
moral,
very
ethical
family,
person.
very nice. Yeah, you know, there's one story. I have to jump out of this for a minute.
Go for it.
Story about us getting married. When we got married, people didn't fly, so I had two uncles. I was an only child, very small family. So my two uncles, I wasn't sure if they're coming to Israel for the wedding. One uncle decided, my uncle the dentist Frank, so I had to come right away. The other, my uncle Dave, Azriel, who Ozzy's named after, said, I can't come to the wedding. What happens? 2 nights before the wedding, we get a call, he's coming. Why is he coming? He had a dream, and his father, Eli, who my son Eli's named after, says to him in his dream, Azriel, going to the wedding? Azriel goes, no, I can't go. I can't. You know,
Israel,
I can't afford. I can't go there. He says, what? He says, if you're not going, I'm not going. My uncle heard this, booked a flight that night.
Booked a flight that morning.
Is that that's a great story. Family the whole time. Miriam's family, the Agashevas, is a very, very famous and well-known family. You had Bubby's mother's brothers were very famous people in the Judaic or Jewish history. You had Dr. Irving Agus, who was a famous professor at YU. You had Dr. Chaim Agus, who was like the preeminent doctor in Borough Park. Everybody used it. You had Dr.
Rabbi
Jacob Agus, who was part of the conservative movement, one of the the main people there. So you had a lot of well-known people in that
Two
family.
of whom are Encyclopedia Judaica.
And to this day, their descendants are also very well known.
Honestly, I always identified more with my father's side of the family rather than my mother's, because I adored my father, who lost his father at the age of 9, and so he did not get a good education. But he was very successful in business. He was the pillar of the family. He was a big Baal Tzedakah, and he was so warm and kind and good-natured, and I adored him. I always felt more akin to my father's family, and I wasn't, until I was an adult, I assumed that all of them were of his caliber. But as I matured and grew, I realized that he was really something special in his family. When we were going out, we said that eventually we would make Aliyah to Israel. And we lived in Borough Park in anticipation of going on Aliyah to Israel. And then when Tova was literally a year old, we did attempt Aliyah. We moved to my mother's apartment in Ramat Gan, and we stayed in Israel for approximately a year or 10 months or a year.
At the time, it was very, very difficult economically in Israel. The inflation was off the wall. Jobs were difficult to secure. And at the time, the Olymp from North America, the return rate was in the upper 90s, return rate. So I guess I was one of those, and I just couldn't make it there at the time.
And also, we wanted to have more children, and at the time, the health system in Israel, in order to get to a specialist, it was very difficult, and I didn't think that I would get the help I needed. By the age of 1, she knew the alphabet in Hebrew and in English. She counted to 10 in Hebrew and in English, and she was the most adorable thing around. Avi and Ahuva, they were a handful. They were the team. They were a team. The two of them one would open the fridge, the other would throw the eggs. They dumped talcum powder all over the sofa in the living room. We
actually got a couple who would babysit them for a few hours a day, and we were very fortunate that we found somebody who was crazy enough to take a job to take care of twins. Unfortunately, we found out afterwards that she was mentally imbalanced. Yeah, it's true. I don't want to tell you the end of this plot story, but she was imbalanced. Nothing to do with us.
It was kind of ironic because when we had Tova, we couldn't get a babysitter for anything because she didn't sleep. It wasn't like an easy job but when we had the twins, I put an ad in the advance for help with the twins. My friend said if a gun was pointed at her head, she wouldn't call up for that ad. And meanwhile, we had loads of people who were dying to work with the twins.
And then we had Ellie, who was pretty easy to take care of. Basically, Tova took care of him a good period of time, but he was a plumbing nightmare. He loved to stick things in the toilet, and the plumber, whose name was Jack, we knew was like a family member, would be here every 2 months, yanking things out of the toilet, large objects. So I don't know why he went to ophthalmology. We were sure he'd be in urology or something, connected to a toilet, but that's. I guess we just want to add a few words about travel in our life, which has been a really big part. We both have this really desire to travel, and we've traveled so much over the years. I guess I started traveling before I even met Bubby, and so did Bubby. She traveled. She was in Israel in 1967, right after the war, and I was in Europe those days. We even traveled after we decided that we were not staying in Israel. We said to ourselves, we had a car there. Hey, let's have some fun. So we took our car and we drove down through the Sinai Desert, and we made
with baby Tova to Sharm el-Sheikh, which in Jewish history is a famous place, and moving around through sand dunes and stuff. It was really wonderful. And then after that, we traveled for the rest of our married life. Anytime we had a vacation, we both were teachers, so we had summers. And before I started working camps for a few years, we traveled in the summers. We traveled during Christmas vacations and Easter vacation, and we saw a good chunk of the world, and it was really something which we both had the love for, and we did it independently always. Irony is that when I had all 4 children, I didn't have parents who could babysit and take care of and help us out, and that's when I really couldn't get away. I couldn't have a vacation because I couldn't have a break because I didn't have. We were grateful if our parents, if Dad's parents and my mother were healthy and didn't need us. We were grateful. We couldn't count on them for any support. Right. So those were very hard years.
So when so if you ask one of the highlights of our life, I guess would be travel was number 2, and number 1, of course, is our family. We have 4 great kids. Tremendous grandchildren. I know everybody says it.
No,
but
every one of our grandchildren is
special.
Very special, very kind. There isn't a clinker in the group. Everyone is really a gem. And I say that quite objectively, I think.
Yeah, I have to say.
And I really look forward, I really have hopes that all of them will stay as B'nai Torah and religious, and continue having wonderful midot, and most important, be there for one another.
Right.
This is the beginning of a new painting. When I retired, I attended a course of acrylic painting at the Retired Teachers Center, and I bought all these acrylic paints and brushes, and I started a new hobby, painting. And it's kept me busy and sane during
And
Corona.
Bubby's become a very good painter with
Thank
many
you.
paintings.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to start?
No, you just.
Values, I guess, most of us would want our own values as part of our own ego. That whatever I think is a good value, I'd like to impart upon my grandchildren. So I think, one, I like them to keep up the Jewish Torah tradition. Of course, in my myopic view, the way I do it, whatever way they want to do it, actually. And I like them to also show a strong sense of family and be there for one another, and especially, the absence of machlokes, of division, because there's so many families are ripped apart by fighting over whether it be money, power, etc. And it's just a shame. And thank God I do not see that in my family, my children or grandchildren. And I would hope to impart this to them as well, that they should follow in this tradition. Miriam?
Is there anything you want to add?
I agree with that. The most important thing is that they should follow in the way of the Torah. And I'm really scared for my grandchildren because I see the world as far more challenging today than it was when I was a younger person.
We lived through a golden era to a certain degree. The creation of Israel, etc., etc.
That was really one of the highlights of my life, the miracle of 67 war. All the miracles that we see today in Eretz Israel is really amazing. But I really hope that my grandchildren are thinking people, and they don't swallow the larger culture of our time, which is so contrary to our Jewish values. And I really hope that they're well grounded, and they seek truth, and they value their Jewish identity and the Holy Land of Israel. And I hope that they're activists. That's what I'm hoping for, that they're activists and they don't let life just pass them by, but participate and be part of Jewish history in the future.
Just wanted to add, Bubby was just talking about the activists. I never even mentioned about all the rallies and activism that we were involved in. It's sort of like everybody was, whether it be for Ethiopian Jewry or Russian Jewry, how many days we spent with marches and et cetera, and thank God you saw that the Russians were able to go to Israel, Ethiopians were able to enter Israel, and these things did make a difference. So activism is important.
I was born after the Holocaust, and I was forever amazed how many people my age would talk about, they read a book about a Holocaust and they were up the whole nine, they were crying. But then when it came to marching for Soviet Jewry, or doing things for Israel or for their fellow Jews, they were not activists at all. And to me, it's very essential.
And now it's much more difficult. It's
Right.
much more difficult.
It's very essential that you transmit your values in action and not just feelings. I think it's very important. What I would like my grandchildren and grandchildren, what characteristic I'd like them to have, is to pursue truth and what's right and what's good, regardless of whether you're going to, other people will do that for you, or whether you'll get reward for it. To know that you did the right thing is reward in and of itself. And many times in life over the years, I've done the right thing, sometimes at great personal cost, but I never regretted it because I think it's very important to do the right thing. That's it.
remember when you weren't there, when I didn't care for anyone but you. And I swear we've been through everything there is. Can't imagine anything we've missed. Can't imagine anything the two of us can do. Through the years, you never let me down. You've turned my life around. The sweetest days I've found with you. Through the years, I've never been afraid. I've loved the life we made, and I'm so glad I stayed right here with you through the years. I can't remember what I used to do, who I trusted, who I listened to before. I swear you taught me everything I know. Can't imagine needing someone so. Through the years it seems to me I need you more and more. Through the years, through all the good and bad, I know how much we had. I've always been so glad to be with you. Through the years, it's better every day. You've kissed my tears away. As long as it's okay, I'll stay with you through the years. Through the years when everything went wrong, together we were strong. I know that I belong right here with you. Through the years, I've never had a doubt. We'd always work things out. I've learned what life's about by loving you through the years. Through the years, you never let me down.
Cause you're a sky full of stars. I'm gonna give you my heart. Cause you're a sky full of stars. Cause you light up the park. I don't care, go on and tear me apart. I don't care if you do. Cause in the sky full of stars, I think I saw you. stars. I wanna die in your arms. Cause you get lighter the more it gets dark. I'm gonna give you my heart. I don't care